And if you are vulnerable to guilt, if you have been trained to feel responsible for other people's emotions, if you have learned that you should prioritize other people's needs over your own, then this works perfectly. Then you spend your entire life trying to not hurt them. Then you spend your entire life trying to prove that you care. Then you spend your entire life sacrificing for someone who will never be satisfied. The sixth reason toxic people always play the victim is that they have no capacity for empathy. They cannot actually feel what other people feel. They cannot actually care about other people. Is pain. They cannot actually be moved by someone else's suffering. They can only see things from their own perspective. They can only care about their own needs. And because they have no genuine empathy, they can be incredibly cruel without actually feeling anything. They can hurt people without remorse. They can betray people without guilt. They can manipulate people without any sense that they are doing something wrong. Because in their mind, they are always the victim. They are always justified. They are always right. But here is the thing about people with no empathy. They are very good at pretending to have empathy. They are very good at looking like they care. They are very good at appearing to be hurt by what you have done. They are very good at the performance of victim. So most people cannot tell the difference between someone who is genuinely hurt and someone who is performing hurt. Here is where most people get uncomfortable. This is not about being sympathetic to people who have actually been hurt. This is about recognizing the difference between someone who has experienced trauma and is working through it, and someone who is deliberately using victimhood as a manipulation tactic. Real victims want to heal. Real victims eventually take responsibility for their recovery. Real victims do not spend their entire lives blaming other people. Real victims do not use guilt as a weapon. Real victims do not punish people for not saving them. But toxic people who play the victim never heal. They never take responsibility. They never stop blaming other people. They never stop using guilt. They never stop punishing. They stay stuck in their victim narrative because the victim narrative works for them. It gets them what they want. So what is the dark psychology here? What is really happening when someone always plays the victim? What is happening is that someone has learned that victimhood is more powerful than accountability. What is happening is that someone has learned that they can get their needs met through manipulation more effectively than through honesty. What is happening is that someone has learned that other people's guilt is more valuable than their own integrity. And most people do not want to see this. Most people want to believe that people are fundamentally good. Most people want to believe that victimhood is always genuine. Most people want to believe that if someone is acting like a victim, they probably are a victim. But that is not always true. Sometimes people are just using victimhood as a tool. Sometimes people are just being manipulative. Sometimes people are just refusing to take responsibility. And the cost of not seeing this clearly is enormous. The cost is that you get trapped in relationships with people who will never change. The cost is that you sacrifice your own needs for someone who does not actually care about you. The cost is that you spend years trying to prove you are not the bad guy to someone who has decided you are. So how do you recognize a toxic person who is playing the victim? First, pay attention to whether they ever take responsibility. Do they ever acknowledge that they did something wrong? Do they ever apologize genuinely? Or is it always someone else's fault? If it is always someone else's fault, then they are not actually a victim. They are someone who refuses to be accountable. Second, pay attention to their reactions to boundaries. When you set a boundary, do they respect it? Do they understand? Or do they react with extreme emotion and make you feel bad? If they react with extreme emotion, they might be trying to manipulate you. Third, pay attention to how they talk about other people. Do they have empathy for people? Do they acknowledge other people's perspectives? Or is it always about how they have been wronged? If it is always about how they have been wronged, they might lack empathy. Fourth, pay attention to how they respond when you do something for yourself. Are they happy for you? Do they support your growth? Or do they make you feel guilty for not prioritizing them? If they make you feel guilty, they are using guilt as a weapon. Fifth, pay attention to your gut. If something feels off, if something feels manipulative, if something feels wrong, it probably is. Trust your instincts. Your nervous system can often sense manipulation, even if your conscious mind does not want to admit it. And most importantly, remember you are not responsible for their feelings. You are not responsible for their recovery. You are not responsible for proving you are not the bad guy. You are only responsible for yourself. And if someone is using victimhood to control you, the healthiest thing you can do is remove yourself from the situation. Because toxic people who play the victim will not change. They have learned that victimhood works. They have learned that it gets them what they want. They have no incentive to change. So you cannot fix them. You cannot convince them to take responsibility. You cannot make them see clearly. You can only protect yourself by not engaging with their narrative. So if you are in a relationship with someone who always plays the victim, you have a choice. You can keep trying to prove you are not the bad guy. You can keep sacrificing for someone who will never be satisfied. You can keep participating in their manipulation. Or you can walk away. You can stop engaging with the narrative. You can refuse to feel guilty. You can refuse to be controlled. And yes, they will probably play the victim about you leaving. Yes, they will probably tell everyone that you are cruel and selfish and ungrateful. Yes, they will probably try to make you feel guilty for going, but that is the final proof that they are not actually a victim. That is the final proof that they are just using victimhood as a tool. And once you see that clearly, once you understand what is actually happening, you can leave. And leaving is the healthiest thing you can do. You know someone like this. No matter what happens, it is not their fault. No matter what they do, they are the victim. No matter how badly they treat you, they are the one who has been wronged. No matter how much you sacrifice for them, you are the one being selfish. They have perfected the art of being the victim. And most people do not realize how toxic this actually is. The first reason toxic people always play the victim is that they have learned that victimhood is powerful. They have learned that if they can convince people that they are the victim, then people will excuse their behavior. People will feel sorry for them. People will bend over backwards to help them. People will accept treatment from them that they would not accept from anyone else. And it works. It absolutely works. Because most people are sympathetic to victims. Most people want to help people who are suffering. Most people will tolerate behavior from someone they perceive as a victim that they would never tolerate from someone else. So these people have learned to weaponize they have learned to use their victim narrative as a shield against accountability. They have learned that as long as they can make people believe they are suffering, people will excuse almost anything they do. Here is the part nobody tells you. People who always play the victim are not actually victims. They are predators. They are people who have learned to use sympathy and compassion as tools to manipulate other people. They have learned that vulnerability can be used as a weapon. They have learned that the victim narrative is the most powerful position to be in because it makes you unquestionable. The second reason toxic people always play the victim is that they have never taken responsibility for their actions. Something goes wrong, and instead of asking themselves what they did wrong, they ask themselves who they can blame. Something does not work out, and instead of examining their own behavior, they look for an external cause. They have built an entire worldview where they are never the problem, and this is actually a sign of immaturity. It is a sign of someone who has never grown up. It is a sign of someone who has never learned that their actions have consequences. It is a sign of someone who has never developed the emotional capacity to be accountable for themselves. But most people do not see it this way. Most people see someone who is not taking responsibility, and they think, this person must have had something really bad happen to them. This person must be broken. This person must need help. And they feel compassion instead of seeing clearly that this person is just refusing to grow up. The third reason toxic people always play the victim is that they use their victim status to control other people. If you are the victim, then other people owe you. Other people have to take care of you. Other people have to prioritize your needs. Other people have to make sacrifices for you. Other people have to prove they are not the bad guy by doing what you want. And this is incredibly effective, because most people want to be seen as good. Most people do not want to be the villain in someone else's story. Most people will do almost anything to prove that they are not the bad guy. So if a toxic person can make the narrative that you are the bad guy and they are the victim, then you will spend enormous energy trying to prove that you are not bad. You will make sacrifices. You will compromise. You will bend to their will. And the toxic person knows this. The toxic person has learned that playing the victim is the most effective way to control other people, because you cannot argue with a victim, because you cannot get angry at a victim, because you cannot hold a victim accountable. So the victim wins. The victim gets what they want. The victim controls the dynamic. Here is the part nobody tells you. Toxic people who play the victim are actually very strategic. They are not bumbling around trying to figure out how to get their needs met. They are deliberately using victimhood as a tool. They are deliberately making people feel bad so that people will do what they want. They are deliberately creating narratives where they cannot be questioned. The fourth reason toxic people always play the victim is that they have extremely high sensitivity to criticism, but not real sensitivity. Strategic sensitivity. They react to any criticism, any boundary, any pushback with extreme emotional reactions. They act like you have devastated them. They act like you have betrayed them. They act like you are the most cruel person in the world. And because their reaction is so extreme, because their pain seems so genuine, people back off. People apologize, even though they did nothing wrong. People retract legitimate criticism because the victim is too fragile to handle it. People tiptoe around them. People refuse to hold them accountable because they seem so hurt. But what is actually happening is manipulation. What is actually happening is that the toxic person is using emotional reactions to shut down accountability. What is actually happening is that the victim is using their supposed fragility as a weapon to prevent anyone from ever questioning them. The fifth reason toxic people always play the victim is that they have learned that other people's guilt is a currency they can spend. If they can make you feel guilty, if they can make you feel like you have done something wrong, if they can make you feel like you are the bad guy, then they have power over you. And they spend this guilt constantly. They extract it from people over and over. Every time you try to leave, they tell you how much you would be hurting them. Every time you set a boundary, they tell you how selfish you are being. Every time you refuse to help them, they tell you how ungrateful you are. Every time you do anything for yourself, they tell you how little you care about them.